Tonight, fit to stand trial. An Israeli court rules Malka Leifer is well enough to be extradited to Australia.
I don't see how anyone can say that she hasn't been deceitful and she hasn't been manipulating the system.
Also tonight, an SAS soldier accused of killing another civilian in Afghanistan. A 30-year-old from central Queensland becomes the country's youngest person to die from coronavirus. And a win for the leadbeater's possum. The federal court rules Victorian loggers breached threatened species laws. Good evening, Tamara Oudyn with ABC News. After a 6-year legal battle, the alleged victims of former Melbourne principal Malka Leifer are celebrating a significant victory in their bid to bring her back from Israel to face sex abuse charges. A judge in Jerusalem has found Malka Leifer has been faking mental illness and that she is fit to be extradited to Melbourne. We'll cross shortly to Middle East correspondent Eric Torchek, but first, here's Mary Guerin.
Staggering, surreal, validating. The ruling has delivered these three sisters a long-awaited breakthrough.
We stand here today and I feel so proud of us three.
This process has really bruised us, but it has not broken us.
It's 11 years since they first made statements to police accusing Malka Leifer of sexually abusing them at Melbourne's Adass Israel School. She flew to Israel and in her absence was charged with 74 child sex offences. But bid after bid for her extradition failed, as her lawyers claimed she suffered from debilitating mental illness despite hidden camera vision.
I don't see how anyone can say that she hasn't been deceitful and she hasn't been manipulating the system.
The delays sparked multiple diplomatic approaches, including the Attorney-General's late last year.
I did express some level of frustration over the time that it had taken.
Israeli police alleged the country's then Deputy Health Minister had interfered with her extradition.
We have not seen a competent, satisfactory legal system working in the Malka Leifer case until now.
In January, a panel of psychiatrists said the 54-year-old was faking mental illness. Now the district court in Jerusalem agrees she's fit to return.
It took 66 court hearings to hear what we should have heard in court hearing number 1.
This process now seems to be moving again, which is very pleasing.
Ms Leifer's lawyers are prepared to appeal.
We believe that the decision is not clean from doubts and considerations because it is not a case of black or white.
The sisters' supporters have called for caution.
So it's a huge decision, but we need to all be sober about it. There's a long, long way to go.
As ribbons were tied to the gates of their old school, the sisters had this message.
This moment will show all those survivors across the world that they too have a voice and give them the encouragement to speak out.
Mary Guerin, ABC News, Melbourne.
Middle East correspondent Eric Torchek has been to court countless times for this case and joins me now. So, Eric, can we now expect Malka Leifer will soon be extradited to Australia?
Tomorrow, the extradition hearing will start in July, and Israeli state lawyers tell us that it's mainly procedural. They say there's 3 things that they need to show. The first is that there's an extradition agreement between Australia and Israel. The second is that the request comes from a recognised and competent legal authority, in this case Victoria Police. And the third is that there's a corresponding charge in Israeli law, which there is. So on the face of it, it would seem that those requirements have been fulfilled, but we should remember that it's taken a very long time to get to this point, and there could still be more surprises. You'll remember the entire process to extradite Malka Leifer was stopped because of her supposed mental illness, and it took that extensive campaign and a hidden camera investigation to prove she was lying. Even if the Israeli state attorneys are successful in their extradition request, Malka Leifer's defence team has indicated that they are already preparing to appeal to Israel's Supreme Court, and we don't know just how long that will take. So while this decision is a significant milestone, the fight to bring her back to Melbourne to face those charges is a long way from being over.
Eric Torchek in Jerusalem, thank you. An Australian Special Forces soldier filmed shooting dead an unarmed Afghan man. He's also being investigated for the alleged unlawful killing of another civilian. ABC Investigations has spoken to members of an SAS patrol who allege the same operator killed an unarmed, disabled man on an earlier operation in 2012. Mark Willesee has this exclusive report and a warning: it contains scenes that some viewers may find distressing.
It was this SAS helmet camera vision broadcast by Four Corners that for the first time showed how some individuals in Australia's Special Forces dealt with Afghan civilians. Brought down by an Australian dog and curled up on the ground in a wheat field, this young man is quiet, compliant and unarmed. Training his weapon on him is an SAS operator known as Soldier C.
Quick, no! Quick!
After this killing was broadcast in March, Soldier C was stood down. He's now being investigated by the Australian Federal Police. The ABC can now reveal that Soldier C is alleged to have killed another unarmed Afghan 2 months before the Wheatfield shooting. Two members of Soldier C's patrol that day have told the ABC they witnessed the killing. Both say the victim was unarmed, a civilian, and was intellectually disabled. One says he was limping away from the Australians in fear when Soldier C shot him in the back of the head from 15 to 20 metres away. One SAS patrol member says the dead man was then dressed in a combat chest rig containing assault rifle magazines so that they could claim he was a combatant. It's an incident known among the Special Forces as the village idiot killing. The soldiers also say the killing was covered up. At a briefing after the incident, the patrol was told that the man should be regarded as a high-value target and therefore a legitimate kill. An ABC investigation has tracked down the victim's relatives and discovered that the dead man's name was Zia Oudyn, a farmer in his early 20s from Kandahar province, who his family says was mentally disabled.
There was a raid. Helicopters landed at 11 in the morning. Zia Oudyn was about 80 to 100 metres away from them and was walking home. But then the soldiers shot him in here. The bullet had pierced through his skull.
The ABC can confirm this case, like the killing in the wheatfield, is being investigated by the Australian Federal Police.
We have a number of active, and we're on the record, a number of active investigations in relation to war crimes.
How seriously is the AFP taking these allegations?
Very seriously.
The two cases involving Soldier C are being investigated by the Inspector General of the Australian Defence Force as part of an inquiry into alleged war crimes in Afghanistan. And Defence says it would be inappropriate to comment while that inquiry is still underway. Mark Willesee, ABC News.
Police have abruptly decided to abandon their long investigation into the leaking of a secret document to News Corporation journalist Annika Smethurst. The reporter endured a raid on her home in the hunt for the leaker, but federal police now say they can't find the evidence to lay a charge. Matthew Doran reports from Canberra.
Almost a year to the day that the Australian Federal Police turned Annika Smethurst's Canberra home and life upside down, the announcement, it's now considered case closed.
No one will be prosecuted.
Ms Smethurst sparked the ire of the federal government in April 2018, publishing a story in News Corp's Sunday tabloids about a plan for the nation's international listening post, the Australian Signals Directorate, to be given the power to eavesdrop on Australians. The front page splash was based on classified information, prompting the AFP to be called in to find the source of the leak.
It was a serious breach. It needed to be investigated. We investigated, we did our job.
I find it, I must say, frustrating that it did take that long for the matter to be resolved.
The police argue the delay is due to News Corp challenging the search warrant in the High Court, which temporarily stopped the AFP scouring the evidence taken from Ms Smethurst's apartment. A ruling on that was handed down last month. The media giant claimed vindication in today's announcement, the company's chairman saying the decision to drop the investigation shows why law reforms to protect journalists and whistleblowers are sensible and essential.
We still need to hear from the government that it is going to change the law.
I can honestly say to you that those matters haven't been the focus during the peak of the COVID pandemic.
While today's announcement might draw a line under the case of Ms Smethurst, there are still two ABC journalists, Dan Oakes and Sam Clark, who are facing a separate investigation over their reporting uncovering alleged misconduct by special forces in Afghanistan. and they've been waiting for an outcome for 622 days.
I've spoken to one of those two journalists today. There's no indication of any relief.
It's still an active investigation.
622 days and counting. Matthew Doran, ABC News, Canberra.
A worker at a Melbourne quarantine hotel has tested positive to COVID-19. The staff member from the Ridges Hotel on Swanston Street is among 8 people who've tested positive since yesterday. There are currently 60 active cases of coronavirus in Victoria, and there have now been 183 community transmissions. Residents and workers at Linden Aged Care Home in Camberwell are undergoing a second round of testing after 2 workers tested positive yesterday. The abattoir at the centre of the state's biggest cluster Cedar Meats will fully reopen tomorrow. 111 cases have been linked to the factory at Brooklyn in the city's west, but there have been no new cases now for 6 days. A 30-year-old Queensland man has become the youngest person to die with coronavirus in Australia. Fever clinics have been set up in the central Queensland town of Blackwater, where the man was found dead at home yesterday afternoon. Tests later carried out confirmed he had COVID-19. The man's partner is in home isolation after experiencing symptoms, but has returned a negative test. It's the first case of coronavirus in the town.
It appears that this gentleman who has passed away was ill for some time and did not get tested.
Queensland Health is investigating any link to a Rockhampton nurse who worked at an aged care centre while unwell. The ABC understands the nurse had also been in Blackwater before she was diagnosed. Well, it's now been 4 months since the country's first coronavirus case was recorded. In the latest round of surveys, the ABC has sought to gauge the current mood of Australians. Here's Casey Briggs with the results.
We already know people are feeling lonelier and more anxious, but the news from the latest ABC Vox Pop Lab survey isn't all bad. Around 4 in 5 Australians said they were coping very well, but only around half that thought Australians in general felt the same way. Older people tended to think Australians were doing better, 51% of those aged over 65, compared to just 28% of people under 35. And those on the political right tended to be more optimistic than those on the left.
What that data is saying is, yeah, our individualised concern is relatively, minimal, but actually, yeah, I have concern for other people. And of course, what we know is that's driving people's behaviour. That's why people are complying.
The curve's flat, but that doesn't mean there's less concern out there. In fact, the opposite is true. 36% of people are now very concerned about the pandemic, the highest that's been in the past 5 weeks. As we get out and about more, fears that a family member or friend will contract the virus have also increased. And worries about the health of the Australian economy are at a high, up 6% in the past week.
It's our grandchildren's future that really is the big question mark for us.
I'm not one of the percentage that is stressed. I feel just do the right thing, stay away from, do the social distancing.
People have adapted their lifestyles dramatically, in big ways and small. Search traffic for terms like banana bread, brownies and bread all peaked last month. Interest in sourdough has risen more than 6-fold, but they're now all on the decline. As cafes open up, Australia might be over its need to need.
Oh, very good. To the US now. And riots have broken out in the US state of Minneapolis over the death of an unarmed black man at the hands of police. 4 officers have been fired after video emerged of one of them kneeling on the neck of the handcuffed man who later died in hospital. North America correspondent David Lipson reports, and a warning, this report contains distressing images.
It's happened again. Fury and grief vented on the streets of America. Tear gas fired at crowds, rocks thrown at police, vehicles trashed. And more lives lost, sparked by the death of a black man at the hands of white police officers. The arrest of George Floyd is captured here on a mobile phone.
I can't breathe over there.
Pinned to the ground.
They will kill me, man.
handcuffed with a police officer's knee on his neck.
Bro, with your feet on his neck, man, you get off the phone.
He pleads for air. "Don't kill me," he utters. They're among his last words. Onlookers beg the officers for mercy.
Bro, he's not moving.
By the time an ambulance arrives, he's unresponsive and later pronounced dead.
He kept saying I can't breathe, and later on he said he started calling his mama name, and he died.
Police say the suspect was under the influence when they arrived to arrest him over an allegation of forgery. The mayor was far less forgiving.
When you hear someone calling for help, you are supposed to help. This officer failed in the most basic human sense.
Last year, almost 1,100 Americans were killed by police. About a quarter were black, but they make up just 13% of the population. State authorities and the FBI have stepped in. Body cam footage of the incident is being reviewed. In the meantime, the 4 officers in attendance have been sacked.
Being black in America should not be a death sentence.
Another American community in mourning. David Lipson, ABC News, Washington.
Still to come this hour, the billions of dollars spent each year to fix back pain.
I remember the surgeon said to me, "At the end of this, you'll be normal." The pain is 10 times worse than childbirth.
It's important just not to say, because surgery is not right for all back pain, that we just say no surgery for any back pain.
Plus, why apprentices are being hit hard by the pandemic. That's coming up.
Police are investigating a possible sighting of 2 missing campers who vanished in Victoria's remote high country more than 2 months ago. Russell Hill and Carol Clay last made radio contact on the 20th of March from Wonnangatta Station in the Victorian Highlands. Their burnt-out campsite and abandoned vehicle were discovered the following day. Police have confirmed Russell Hill went to the site with his drone a week before he took Ms Clay camping there. Police say there were 3 sightings of an older couple in the remote area on the 22nd of March and want public help to work out if it was the missing pair. Police want anyone who visited the area during March to contact them. Police are investigating the death of prominent greyhound trainer Karen Leake, whose body was found at her home in Melbourne's southeast yesterday morning. Police are appealing for anybody who has been near or recently driven past the 69-year-old's property on Cross Road, Devon Meadows. Victoria's Royal Commission examining the state's mental health system has been granted a 3-month extension because of the coronavirus crisis. The Commission says the pandemic has taken a mental toll on many people, so reforming the system is more urgent than ever. Despite having to cancel its final round of public hearings, the inquiry is forging ahead in its work by moving online. Zalika Rismal reports.
On mute, Indigo.
Yeah, the cat actually did that.
It's a relatable working from home moment. Like everyone, Victoria's Mental Health Royal Commission is also grappling with how to do its work during COVID-19.
We have had to think of different ways of still collecting the evidence and the witness statements.
Indigo Daya was one of the first to testify from home with the support of her cat Angus.
It was a little bit traumatic, but it was also felt empowering.
A victim of childhood abduction and sexual abuse, Ms Daya spent 9 years in the mental health system as an adult.
It replicated the kinds of abuses that led to my distress in the first place.
Ms Daya says police forced her to hospital, where she was strip-searched, drugged against her will, left half naked in an emergency department for hours and locked in seclusion rooms following suicide attempts.
Imagine being the most distressed you've ever felt in your life and being locked in a tiny little room with a cardboard bedpan.
Advocates say the Commission needs to examine the quality of mental health services.
My concern is that with the pandemic and with the crisis, we won't really be focusing on that reform that needs to happen.
Ms Daya hopes the extra 3 months given to the Commission will allow more people to share their stories and help create a more compassionate system.
I am really grateful that I was able to testify, but I think it's not okay actually that so few people got to speak out.
The Commission's final report will now be delivered next February. Zalika Rismal, ABC News, Melbourne.
Frontline disability support workers at risk of exposure to COVID-19 are fighting for a temporary pay rise of almost $5 an hour. The workers provide personal care and social support to those living with a disability who've either tested positive or are suspected of having coronavirus. But some employer groups are opposing the pay rise. Here's Disability Affairs reporter Naz Campanella.
Before COVID-19, Paula Galladley used to support people living with a disability in day centres. But when restrictions were introduced, she started working with clients in their homes.
In a lot of cases, the sort of support we provide is really difficult to do at a social distance.
The 54-year-old from the New South Wales South Coast says infection is a constant concern.
It's just something you can't think of, just leave work and forget about it.
It's that increased risky workload that is the subject of a wage case before the Fair Work Commission. Support workers are asking for a temporary increase of almost $5 an hour in recognition of their jobs helping people with confirmed or suspected coronavirus infections. Unions are backing the push, saying it's needed to ensure workers continue to show up.
Understandably, it does increase the amount of work that those workers are doing, the intensity of that work.
In their submissions to Fair Work, some major industry groups say there's no evidence of increased risk during the pandemic, and if there was, it would be negligible. But one disability service provider has already started paying the increased wages to affected staff.
It is not fair that we are expecting these incredibly capable, committed, loyal staff to turn up and put themselves potentially in harm's way, and not even to recognise that.
So far, so good.
Paula hopes next month's decision will acknowledge the value of her work.
That's a recognition of the increased level of responsibility and also a lot of personal sacrifice that would need to be that support worker supporting a person with COVID-19.
Well done, Paula. Recognition of an important job in uncertain times. Naz Campanella, ABC News.
The Federal Court has ruled a timber company owned by the Victorian Government breached environmental laws by logging in areas inhabited by the endangered leadbeater's possum. Vic Forests was found to have unlawfully logged in 26 areas that are home to both the possum and the threatened greater glider. The court also found that plans to log in 41 other sections of the Central Highlands would put the animals at significant risk. Vic Forests has an agreement which gives it exemptions from environmental laws, but today's findings determined it had breached that agreement. It's estimated there could be fewer than 1,200 leadbeater's possums left in the wild. Animal and plant species which were already considered endangered or threatened may have been totally wiped out by the last fire season. The Royal Commission into the bushfires has heard the inferno has proven to be an ecological disaster. Anna Henderson reports.
These images are seared into the nation's memory of fire season. Desperate animals struggling to outrun danger.
It is going to take 30, 50 years to restore animals back into good numbers, but unless we address the issues with our changing climate, that's never going to happen.
This koala hospital has returned almost all that survived back to the wild now, but the Royal Commission has heard many animals did not make it.
An ecological disaster.
The fires burned with an unusual intensity and devastating results.
More than 300 of these nationally listed threatened species were in the path of the fire. The entire known range of some species was burnt.
But among the evidence of biodiversity lost, a tale of survival. The Jurassic-era Wallamai pines are in a secret New South Wales location. Only a handful of the living fossils are known to exist across the world. Over summer, an extraordinary plant rescue was undertaken. In the end, webcams were left to monitor when it got too dangerous for specialist firefighters to stay.
If the canopy had burnt, the results would have been catastrophic.
The Royal Commission heard Australia has globally distinct biodiversity and only about 30% of what's here has been named and identified. It's possible over the fire season some species have disappeared before they were ever discovered by Western science. Anna Henderson, ABC News, Canberra.
Further unrest in Hong Kong triggered some late selling on the Australian market, but investors flocked back to the banks. Here's Philip Lasker.
The Australian share market essentially held on to its gains, and it's pretty much all the banks. The local market's financial index has rallied nearly 12% this week. Look at the big players. This was a great day for the Gang of Four. NAB increased the size of its capital raising by $750 million from $500 million. Investors think the downturn won't be as bad as first thought. This price earnings measure factors in what UBS thinks will be the bank's provisions for bad loans. If you reckon the economy will be hit hard with a high number of bad loans, the banks look expensive. But strip away the bad loan provisions and look at profit before tax, the banks are cheap. So those feeling the bad news is overdone are buying these stocks. The domestic market slipped 5 points after a very strong start to the week. Optimism is not good for gold shares, but energy stocks are recovering. The latest construction numbers show what happened during the March quarter this year. It doesn't account for the full coronavirus effect, but building and construction were weakening. Apartments drove most of the fall. Instead of buying new homes, people started renovating, as you can see by the pickup in alterations. It's going to get much worse, though. That's why the government is considering a round of housing grants to support the industry. The Australian dollar is close to a 3-month high against the greenback. It's well above 66 US cents, and that's finance.
Collingwood coach Nathan Buckley says Jordan De Goey is contrite after he was allegedly caught using his mobile phone while driving when his licence was suspended. The incident happened a year ago. But today, De Goey's case was adjourned, meaning the Pies star won't have to face court until September. It's not the first time the Collingwood player has been in trouble. In 2017, he broke his hand in a bar fight, but blamed his dog.
I can confirm his dog wasn't driving, so we can put that one to rest.
Buckley says the 24-year-old has returned to training in good shape after quarantine and is excited to play in round 2 against Richmond. Time for the weather now. Here's Paul Higgins.
And Sam, we had a lot of this mid-level cloud hovering over the state today, but it really wasn't much of a rainmaker, despite all these radar echoes you might have been seeing today. We had up to 1 millimetre of rain in the northeast, but Dartmoor in the southwest has scored the most, around 5 millimetres, and a couple of millimetres at Casterton. Our eastern half was chilliest overnight. Went down to not -1 degree at Lake Eildon and Mount Hotham Airport. It was also mildest today in the east, along with Mildura, 19 degrees at Bairnsdale, Latrobe Valley, Orbost and Yarram. Not as cold as it has been in the past few mornings around Melbourne. Still only 3 degrees though in the Yarra Valley. Today's city high 17.1 at 1:19 this afternoon. Outside now under the cloudy skies, it is sitting at 14. 25 or 26 along the Queensland coast today, and they had a few spots of rain in Perth this morning. Otherwise, it was dry in these cities. Cloud near a weakening front moved across our skies today. Another front, you can just make it out there, is heading for the nation's southwest. That one is going to slip away to the south of us after racing across the bight tomorrow. Light winds for us tomorrow and Friday underneath this high. But if we fast forward to the weekend, a cold front will be here Saturday night into Sunday. You can see the rain there. And then a stronger front on Monday, bringing a much chillier outbreak. Tomorrow, Perth is in for showers and thunderstorms. In Adelaide, a possible shower. Brisbane will be mostly sunny. Morning fog for Canberra and Sydney, and in Hobart, partly cloudy. Back home here is that weakening front crossing the state overnight, with just a shower or two still around tomorrow, but staying dry in the far northwest. Morning fog patches inland, then a partly cloudy Thursday. As you can see, temperatures are pretty much the same as today's, and we'll have a light to moderate west to northwesterly wind. On the bays, a northwesterly at 15 knots, dropping down below 10 knots during the morning. Well, there's a slight chance of a shower in Melbourne later tonight and early in the morning. Otherwise, it's going to be a cool and partly cloudy Thursday. We'll have light winds if you're out riding around your bike, a high of 17, same as today, getting down to 10 degrees in the city overnight. Friday will start out cold and foggy. Some morning cloud, then a sunny afternoon and 17. On Saturday, mostly sunny with a fresh north wind. The chance of some evening showers, 17. Sunday, cloudy with showers A northwesterly wind, a high of 15, 2 to 3 millimetres of rain then. Monday, though, it turns wintry appropriately for the 1st of June. Showers 5 to 10 millimetres. Tuesday, a few morning showers, still only 13. And on Wednesday, 15, Tam.
Thank you, Paul. That's it for this evening's bulletin. Lee Sales is up next with 7:30.